This bride's life was flipped upside down just last year. What she endured to get to this point, I can't even imagine. This dress, it's already beautiful, but we need to add a couple details to make sure this bride is comfortable. Beth was a bride of mine who lived in a nearby town. She was the kind of client whose laughter filled my studio. Her smile could brighten even the darkest, busiest days here. When I worked with her, she was on the verge of the happiest day of her life, her wedding day. But the journey to that moment has been filled with twists and turns that she never saw coming. A year before the wedding, doubts clouded the mind of her fiancé, Mark. It wasn't that he saw any fault with her. She was everything he had ever dreamed of. It's just, he had always been the kind of person to overthink things, to ponder the what-ifs and maybes. And then he often found himself replaying moments in his life when he hadn't been there for the people that he loved. He missed his big brother's college graduation because he went kayaking with a friend. Kayaking. He felt like such a jerk for that one. When his grandmother was terminal with cancer, he only visited her a handful of times. He would give anything now to go back and listen to her stories. They were repetitious at the time. Now, they're fading treasures. The details are getting blurry and can never be recovered. Because of this negative trait of his, he feared he wasn't ready for the responsibility of marriage. He had a track record of letting people down when they needed him the most. Meanwhile, Beth's heart ached for the day when Mark would finally pop the question, but uncertainty lingered. Was it her? Was there something he was waiting on? There was an unspoken shadow cast on their future. Then, on an ordinary day after a jog, Beth felt a strange tingling in her feet. By morning, the sensation had spread, and her fingertips began to almost buzz with pain, and they moved slowly and awkwardly, like she was learning to operate a marionette. Within moments, she found herself collapsing to the floor in agony. Unable to move, she dialed her mother for help. An ambulance took Beth to the hospital where doctors diagnosed her with Guillain-Barre syndrome, a rare and frightening illness that attacks the nervous system. Her health rapidly declined, and she was placed in a medically induced coma, fighting for her life. The neurologist informed her parents that there was a lot of hope for Beth's survival, but the path to it would be uncertain, and the recovery process could be long and difficult. It would likely get much worse before getting better. Beth's parents took turns staying by her bedside. They phoned Mark and let him know the severity of what was going on. Meanwhile, 2 states away, Mark was faced with a dilemma. He had an essential interview for a long-awaited promotion, a culmination of years of hard work. Yet, as he sat in that room, his thoughts were consumed by Beth lying in a hospital bed, fighting a battle he couldn't comprehend. In that moment, the job paled in comparison to the woman that he loved. He forcefully began throwing his clothes into his suitcase. He caught the next flight home, knowingly leaving his aspirations behind for the chance to be by Beth's side. Night after night, Mark sat vigil by her bedside. He turned restlessly in the plastic-coated recliner in her room. The sheet would slip to the floor over and over again. He couldn't even pass the time with sleep. He had to face his thoughts day and night. The sight of her frail form hooked to monitors stirred emotions he never knew he had. It was then, in the quiet of the hospital room, that he realized the depth of his love for Beth. This still wasn't enough to cause him to give in to the idea of considering himself to be good husband material. But an unexplained visitation a few days later would prevent him from avoiding the subject any longer. A few nights later, a new nurse came by the room and only glanced at Beth's vitals. Mark wondered why she was in there. He didn't recognize her. She complimented Mark on his steadfastness. She introduced herself and said that she had been working the neighboring room, but wanted to stop in to say how much she appreciated his unwavering support for Beth. She said, "You are a very faithful husband. Many of our patients have spouses that only check in once a day." With that, she swiftly slipped through the glass doors and went back down the hallway. Mark didn't dare try to correct her. He wondered if this was a sign and that he was being nudged toward a commitment by some greater power. Regret gnawed at him for the times he had doubted himself and their relationship. That night, as the hands of the large wall clock glided by the 3 o'clock hour, he silently promised to marry Beth and to be there for her no matter what. But really, what good did that do? She still laid there, wasting away, not knowing how much he loved her. They needed her to turn a corner. What was going to be the magic elixir to give her the strength to wake up and recover? Weeks turned into an eternity as Beth fought a battle within herself. The coma had taken its toll, leaving her a shadow of her former self. She had lost 20 pounds and could not even breathe on her own, but she fought like a warrior. Her silent, still strength could be felt in the room. As she gradually improved, the tubes and cords were removed one by one. She could breathe on her own. She could open her eyes. Then she could sit up on her own. Eventually, her determination shone through as she underwent grueling rehabilitation to regain the simplest of abilities: to eat, to speak, to walk. Mark never left her side, sacrificing his dreams and aspirations to be the pillar of support that Beth needed. During the hundreds of hours he sat in the dim room with only the sounds of medical devices, he grew to know that he was no longer the inconsiderate, immature boy that he was ashamed of. He could see in himself that, strengthened with a purpose, he would do anything for Beth. He began to plan a proposal that she would never forget. Weeks later, they were in the bright, open rehab area of the hospital. This was their daily challenge: 2 workouts a day. They were painful and often disheartening, but Beth was gradually growing in strength. It was working, albeit slowly. Beth was making her way in baby steps through the parallel bars. Learning to walk again had proven to be her greatest challenge. Perspiration dotted the top of her quivering lips. As she took those final, uncertain steps between the bars, reaching the end with Mark waiting there, his heart pounded with hope. He dropped to one knee. Tears filled the eyes of nurses and onlookers as he proposed, his voice trembling with emotion. A triumphant cheer resounded from the nurses' station. Even the grumpy head nurse had to look away so as not to feel the love in the room. It was a moment of euphoria, a symbol of their unwavering love, even in adversity. Months passed, and Beth made incredible progress. She was released from rehab, determined to move forward. She eventually found her dream dress and had strength enough to begin to enjoy planning her wedding. She still goes to the gym several days a week, but isn't quite happy with her arm strength yet, so she's having me add these sleeves. I'm happy for her and inspired by her recovery. Her walk down the aisle will be a touching miracle for everyone there on her wedding day. Her steps will be the surest that she has ever taken. Share the story with someone who needs a little hope today. Miracles do still happen, and love does too.